I am Jennifer O'Brien. I'm from the Community Foundation of Eastern Connecticut. And just briefly, we're a regional grant maker, and we support nonprofit organizations. We give away over $2 million in grants to nonprofits each year, plus over $600,000 in scholarships to students. And maybe some of you have won some of our scholarships. But we have 4 focus areas: youth empowerment and education, basic needs and rights, environmental conservation, and animal welfare. An additional role of the Community Foundation is to bring nonprofit organizations together to talk about topics of interest to the community and think about how we might work together to solve critical issues in the community. And another thing we do with nonprofits is help build their capacity so they can do the best job in serving their communities through education programs and consultants, things like that. Just briefly, if you're kind of new to this area of nonprofits, what a nonprofit is a tax-exempt organization formed for a public benefit. It's generally run by volunteers, meaning a board. The board of directors is a volunteer group, and also committees are volunteers, but very often there's a paid staff. But sometimes a nonprofit could be completely volunteer. Most commonly, a nonprofit would be in the human services field, education, health, and the arts. And it serves an important role in providing services that the government is not able to do or would not likely to be doing. Think about, all the different arts nonprofits that, if it wasn't for a passionate group of people, a lot of these organizations wouldn't exist. And they really capitalize on the charitable values of the individuals and groups of people who start them. But overall, they really contribute to the rich fabric of opportunities that we have in our communities. Now in New London County, we have almost 2,200 registered nonprofits, which is a fair amount for a county this size. And it's really a significant contributor to the economy when you think about all the jobs and all the services provided by 2,000 nonprofits. Today we're talking about diversity in nonprofits and diversity in leadership and why that's important. And there are a lot of different ways to think about diversity, but it's very often thought of as racial and ethnic diversity. But today we're talking about age diversity, different generations involved for different voices, but it's also gender. It could be diversity of skills, professional skills, and overall just a diversity in perspectives that we want in the fabric of a nonprofit community. And it's really important for boards to reflect the diversity of those they represent. And just for an example, if you have a nonprofit organization working around substance abuse, they really benefit from having maybe someone in recovery in the leadership to present that perspective. So we want to be connected to the community and connected to our constituents. When we think about leadership, we want different points of view on a board to produce better discussions and decisions on major issues and that help identify the range of possibilities, especially when you're talking about planning for the future. Conversely, a board of like-minded people with similar backgrounds risk becoming stagnant and disconnected from the communities they serve. Why you may be interested in getting involved in nonprofits in a leadership position. Well, namely, you are the future. We really need your voice and input. We want your vision of what you see as the future of your community and how you can help make that happen. But it's really also a great way for you to build skills and make connections. It can lead to fulfilling volunteer positions or careers. I recommend getting engaged in a cause you really care about. You could volunteer for an event, join a committee, and slowly over time think about more of the leadership role. And I'll just give you an example of a board that I've been involved with. I've been on a land trust board for several years, and I was the youngest person there, so that is not exactly a young person. And there was no ethnic or racial diversity on the board either. We all care deeply about the environment in our town and preserving the character of our town for the next generation, but we were not engaging the voices of our next generation and hearing what they cared about in their vision for the future and the purpose of conserving land. Is it for recreation? How do we engage these younger next generation voices that we want to pass this down to? So that was something that we really struggled with, and I can't say that we really were able to connect very well with the next generation, but it's something that we still work on, and through our education programs trying to draw new people in. So, thanks.
Thank you.
I'm the Southeastern Connecticut Cultural Coalition. I'm your moderator for the discussion with the panelists. I just want to kind of lay out a little bit of the format. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the role of nonprofits, what it actually means to serve on a board for a couple minutes, and then we're going to get into conversation. We're going to kind of structure some Q&A with the panelists, and then after kind of each topic, kind of really engage you all to kind of have a conversation with you all so that we can get some input and some feedback, and then move on to the next question. So I'm hoping that you all are lively and want to talk and share and maybe move up to the front. So how many of you have ever served on a nonprofit board? I know this group over here, yeah. These are all, so these are, you've served on a board, you've served on a board. Okay, so that means how many of you have not served on a board? Okay, great. So just a little bit about what it means to serve on a board. You're the temporary custodian, you are the owner for a little bit of time as a volunteer. And your jobs are kind of diverse in nature, but in general, your job is care, loyalty, and compliance. And by care, we mean that you're paying attention to it. You're paying attention to the organization's activities and their programs and what's going on, and you are overseeing it. It means that you're loyal and that you're going to put those interests of that organization above other things in your life. And that you're going to make sure that it comes before other interests that you may have. Not always, but most of the time, that's the goal. And the compliance part is, well, you're responsible. You actually have a legal, a fiduciary, a role there that you play as a legal guardian, where you have to make sure the organization is complying with laws, right, from a federal level, from a state level, a local level, and that you're adhering to your organization's bylaws. And bylaws are just a set of rules. It's a written down group of rules that you are instructed to follow. And your job can be kind of broken up into two areas, governance or support. And governance really just means that as a volunteer, as that guardian of the organization, that you're helping to make big decisions, that you're legally, doing some oversight, financial oversight. Does the organization have the money it needs in order to operate? You're overseeing the CEO. You are a boss, right? So I have 23 bosses, right? And that's a lot of bosses to have with a big board. And you're helping with planning and impact. The support side of your board role is that you're really supporting the organization. You're offering advice and input, ideas. You're supporting in terms of ideas of how they can raise money, so events to have and fundraisers, working and actually helping implement those activities. You're an ambassador in the community, which means you're talking it up with your friends. You're making sure people know about what they're doing, and you're getting people to pay attention to what you care about. And last, so you're raising money, a little bit of money, and then you're volunteering. You're actually giving your time, right? So your time to actually attend these events, attend meetings, but you are giving your time. In general, boards kind of fall into three categories. There's kind of the grassroots, all volunteer run. Jen mentioned them before. Kind of the kind of startup, sometimes incubator, or even just really will always be a grassroots organization. It's all volunteer, sometimes no paid staff at all. These are smaller organizations. They have some kind of formal governance structure, some committees. These are great trainer boards. These are boards where the ones where you can just give your time, get involved, and try out and learn about what it means to serve in a nonprofit board. And it just means you're giving more time than anything. Time and passion is what they're asking for at that level. But it's a great opportunity to let them kind of train you and for you to kind of get on board and get a feeler of what it means to learn more to see if this is something you want to actually do more of. So time is the most important thing in that kind of grassroots level. The next stage is a governing board. And in the governing board, it's more structured. There's more committees, you have a set schedule of meetings, you're providing some oversight on programs, there's more structure in terms of the legal and the financial, and it's a kind of a stronger structure in terms of the things you actually have to pay attention to. There's definitely more meetings involved. There's some fundraising. You're going to be asked to do some sense of fundraising. And again, your time here, now your area of expertise is becoming of value. So what it is that you're good at now becomes important. And the third level kind of boards is really that institutional board. These are kind of higher requirements in terms of what you have to both give. Oftentimes it's giving or getting more money than it is in time. You are providing insight and input on policy, so you're really affecting the roots of the organization. And your job really is to ensure that it has sustainability and that it's going to be there for a long time. So it's less time, more giving or getting usually in fundraising. It's more influence oftentimes, but there's also more policy oversight. So we're going to hear from these panelists to hear a little bit about all three of those levels. But that's just a little overview of kind of what it means to kind of serve in a board, what a board might look like. So with that, let me introduce my panelists and get into the discussion. Kevin Saythany, he's a graduate from here and he's on the Norwich Board of Education, which I know you're going to share a little bit about an elected position versus a nonprofit board part, but that's exciting. Thank you for being here. Chris Soto, who is the founding director of Higher Edge in New London, and he can tell you a little bit about that in a minute, but he's also a state representative. So he really kicked it into high gear and got into this place where he could really affect change in policy from a legislator perspective. Adriane Jefferson was formerly with Writer's Block in New London and then jumped right up to the state level and is now with the Connecticut Office of the Arts. So I work with Adriane quite a bit now, more than before. Thank you for being here. And Zechariah Stover, who's with all of them who have many hats, right? So most people who have a board, and most board members who have one hat, usually have a whole bunch more hats, right, that they're wearing for lots of different organizations. I know you're one of them too. Right now with Rotary Community Court in Norwich and also with Sankofa Education and Leadership. Thank you for being here. All right, so let's hear from the panelists. I would love for all four.
The members of the group working together, getting stuff done. I started out with a little neighborhood organization, the Greenville Neighborhood Revitalization Zone. I'm actually still active with them. And that was a good one for me to start with because their meetings are open to the public, so I could go. I didn't have to commit to joining their organization. I could go, sit in on their meetings a couple of times, join some of the subcommittees, working on specific projects like the Family Day, and actually get to work with them and learn a little bit about what they're like to work with before actually committing to joining their organization and holding an office there with them. Some of the reasons why I joined, I was new to town. I had actually just moved into Norwich. I didn't know many people. So for me, it was a mixture of an opportunity for me to meet people in the area and make some friends, and the opportunity to gain skill in leadership, public speaking, and expand my comfort interacting with people. I work with computers, so all day, every day, I'm at a desk behind a computer. When I'm communicating with people, it's all via emails and text messages. So I was very uncomfortable interacting with actual human beings. So I was trying to force myself to actually work with people and get better at doing that.
Thank you.
Anything?
You're good.
How about you?
Yeah, sure. So I am actually in my first year of serving on a board. I am on board for Writer's Block, Inc., which is also where I was the executive director for the Writer's Block, Inc. And so I have a long time association with this organization. hence sparked my reason for wanting to be on the board. And so what I realized is, as a staff member, all of the things that the board, there's a disconnect sometimes between the board and what's going on the ground. And I felt like I could really make a difference by being a person who actually had ground level experience in many different levels within the organization to then come to a higher level and really give true insight to what is going on with our staff, what is going on with the students we're serving, and the people that we're saying that we want to serve. And so for me, I feel like I really played that vital kind of role and that pivotal role where I can associate and talk to the people we're serving and speak for them, because I come from that. And I think it's very important when we're talking about diversity that we're talking about including people such as myself with that type of experience and that type of background on a board level. When you're making higher up decisions, that really will affect the organization. So that was my interest. And in the first year so far, I serve as the director of programming, which is where I'm comfortable with programs. So I do get a chance to work with the team to look strategically at what we're doing when we're looking at programs, how we're serving our community and our students. So yeah, it's been great so far.
And then I'm going to keep going, but just quickly, was it what you expected a board to be?
Yes and no.
Okay, all right, we'll maybe follow up with that a little more.
I didn't really know what to expect.
You didn't know what to
so
expect,
I
okay.
really open-minded.
Okay, open-minded. Chris, what about you? How did you get involved in the boards?
Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here on a Wednesday night. Awesome. So my first board was at the Coast Guard Academy's Alumni Association, and some good advice that I got from a mentor was that I should join a board, but also that you should join a board of an organization that you're passionate about, that in terms of their mission. And sometimes you might join a board because someone recruits you, and I would argue that that's probably not the best way to get on your first board, right? So if you think about the organizations that you love in your community, I would encourage you to think about boards like that because you're already familiar. And that's what made it easy for me to engage with that board, because I didn't have to learn about the organization. I knew about the organization. I just had to learn how to be a good board member as my first time. So that was my first experience in terms of being a board member. And the reason why was just because I wanted to give back to the institution that gave me so much, right? So same thing, like maybe in Adriane's case, she grew up with writer's block, worked there, and wanted to give back. And so I had a very similar experience where I got an education somewhere and I wanted to give back. And even here, so for any students that are at Three Rivers, there's a Three Rivers College Foundation Board. So if you feel like that Three Rivers has given you a great opportunity, there's an opportunity right here at Three Rivers to be a board member on the foundation board.
Was it what you expected your first board?
I didn't know what to expect. Yeah. Just went in with an open mind.
Kevin?
Hello everyone, my name is Kevin Saythany, 25 years old, and I'm currently a member on the Board of Education here in the city of Norwich. For the longest time, I wanted to be a film director. I was always into animation and all those CGI action films. But it wasn't until my junior year over at Norwich Academy, which is our high school here in the city. During my junior year, I had a teacher who taught U.S. history. And he spoke about George Washington, the two Roosevelts, Abraham Lincoln, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., Susan B. Anthony. And he spoke about the continuous sacrifices that they did for their community. And as I continued learning, even after class discussion, as I continued doing research and reading more about these individuals, I was very happy about the continuous time, energy, and commitment that they spent giving back to the community to change where they reside, to change the United States, and to change the international stage. And I told myself during that year, whatever these individuals were doing to help their community, to give back to the community, to the people, I wanted to be involved as well. So the whole path to filming changed to now being more involved in public service. So I went to Three Rivers and I got involved with student government and other student organization that dealt with community engagement. And I did the same thing when I transferred to UConn, the University of Connecticut. And I got even more involved with a lot of clubs and activities, again, the engagement within campus and outside of campus. And from there, it led me to come back to Norwich and got involved with the Youth and Family Services Advisory Board. And from there, catapulted me to run for the Board of Education because the number one thing was to look out for the students. And I know the importance of high quality education for all the young kids who are in elementary school. And the fact that they're going to be the future. You know, they're going to be the one that's going to be shaping how our economy, the cultural aspect of the world, and I wanted to be involved so that I could help them and prepare them for the unforeseeable demands of the future, and I wanted to be a part of that. So I ran for the Board of Education, and it was definitely what I expected. And you know,
Is that good or bad?
That is good.
That's good.
I got a chance to meet with a lot of teachers. Got a chance to meet with a lot of students who were engaged in the classroom homeworks that they're doing, and how happy they were to learn new things. And all the teachers were energized and being, you know, inspirational individuals for these students. So I was happy, and I'm glad to be a part of their lives and to help our public schools in the city. So, good stuff.
In terms of your first board membership, just a quick question for me. Were you the youngest on the Board of Ed?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Chris, were you the youngest on the Coast Guard Academy Board? Adriane?
Yeah.
Zechariah? Okay. Yeah, it's definitely a problem finding some young people who want to be on board, so I'm hoping this helps. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits, right? So, Adriane, personal benefits, and then maybe a little bit about organizational benefits. So how did you personally benefit from serving on the board, and currently right now, it's a short period of time, and maybe what do you think is how the organization has benefited by having your voice, your perspective on the board?
I think as far as how I've benefited, definitely through the network. You expand your network. It's just another, you said it earlier, and I couldn't agree more, it's another avenue of professional development and a way to grow as a leader. So I feel like there's different levels of leadership when you're talking about an organization. So you have, and I'm steering at Colton, so we have some people from the Writers Block here, but we have creative directors, and then, you know, you may have a senior director, you may have a director of operations, an executive director, and then you have being on the board, which is the highest level for a nonprofit organization that you can go. So for me, it was being able to go to the highest level in a nonprofit organization, having already been in ED. Now I'm like, well, what's next? What else can I learn? And then you get to this next level, and you have professional development every once a month when you're on that Sunday call and have to make budget decisions, when you're rushing, you know, down to help the staff, you know, trying to put out fires for whatever's going on in the organization. It is hands-on learning all of the time. So for me, it was just personally important because I'm always trying to push myself to the next level, trying to learn and take that back just in my current work for what I do. So definitely I've benefited in that way. As far as them and what they have gained from me, I hope that they have gained insight, kind of like what I was saying earlier. I just think that insight, when we talk about, I truly believe when we are talking about people we are serving, it is very important to have a person who looks like that person, who has come from that background on that board. When you are talking about and making decisions for people who you're making programs for. So because I've gone through the program, not just have worked at the organization, my background is having gone through the program. Had I not been through the program, honestly, I don't know where I would be today. I probably would have never gone to college. I probably never would have went on to get a master's degree. I never would have done the things that I imagine doing today. And so I owe that very much to Writer's Block. And so I hope that what they get from me is the insight from a young person who's gone through the program to see the potential and to understand and to not be so far removed. So sometimes you can get so far removed the higher up you go that you sometimes don't know what you're talking about. And that's just the truth. So hopefully that's what they've gotten. I don't know. You have to ask them.
The disengagement part is we had an organization who was working on some programming, and some music programs. And one of their ideas was to bring in some, these were band, they wanted to bring in young audiences, right? But they were bringing in the ideas of music from people that these kids had never heard of, right? We're talking like from 50 years ago, 60 years ago, and they didn't understand why what was so popular to them, right, was bringing in Joan Jett and I don't know, that's even but it was such a disconnect because there was no perspective of what's attractive to young people, right? So it's a great point. Zechariah, tell us a little bit about the personal benefits that you get from serving on boards and what you think the organizations get by having you there.
I've benefited quite a bit from serving on different boards and committees. I'm actually up here able to speak to you today, which before getting involved, I would definitely not have done. I've had a lot of opportunities for public speaking. I actually helped start a public speaking club here in Norwich because that's an area that I definitely want to work more on. I've had opportunities for public speaking, for leading different projects, and actually having to bring people together to work towards a common goal and actually accomplish a project or an event. So I've certainly enjoyed working on the different projects, working with the different people that I've worked with. As far as what I bring to the boards, definitely a younger perspective. All of the boards that I'm on have older people. That original board that I was on, we have trouble with all of our people dying off. They're quite elderly. So the board's getting pretty small now, but we're trying to get new people on it to rebuild that. One thing that a lot of the organizations have me help with is their Facebook page and their website and creating flyers and all, because with the older group, it's challenging for them to do that stuff on the computer, and they can just hand it off to me and in whatever format they have it in, and I'll piece it together.
It's good.
It's good to take care of that side that this younger generation knows being able to.
Certainly, the lack of fear of technology, right, is a great asset in many, many ways. So nationwide, the nonprofit boards are like 27% of all boards are all white, and that's, I would say, in our region, that's probably would be a goal for us. So across the region, we are fairly white boards and fairly old for sure, and so you see a lot of boards who are really, really trying hard to find and recruit and identify leadership, and there's just a disconnect because we know it's here, we know it exists, it's the disconnect part of it. So before we move to the question, a little bit of kind of talk with with you all. What are some of those benefits of having young people on a board from diverse backgrounds? What are the benefits that maybe some people are not thinking about? What could you bring to the table that you think people that really could add some value to a nonprofit organization?
So basically, what I feel, the major difference in young people or old people, it's two-way traffic. Old people will have more experience, so you need them as well. Whereas you need young people because they have different needs. Their kids are growing, they need better education system, better schooling, whereas old people have different kind of needs. So I think we need to make a healthy balance in our boards. We cannot just completely ignore all the old people because they have served in these boards for more than 20 years. And I'm serving myself in Commission of City Plan. So I know I'm the youngest one, but we need them because they know ins and out and how things really work. But we need young people to learn these things so at one level they can also do their jobs properly and serve their communities. So what I will suggest, we need a good, healthy balance in all the boards. So maybe that's should be responsibility of the city itself to see what young people are doing in the community, and whoever is doing well, maybe approach them. Because nobody wants to take time out of their family, especially when they are young. When their kids are growing, they are overwhelmed within their family as well. But if we approach them and we make them understand that community needs them, that might be one thing that can motivate them, because you're not getting paid for anything. You got to take out your time from your family. If you're going to the evening meeting, you're not with your kids. But if you make them understand that you are the future, so you need to learn this stuff if you're going to live in your city, and we need you. And once we tell them and give them the proper respect, what they deserve, that might be one ice-breaking right there, which I think will be a healthy way to start things.
So what do you think and how long have you been on that commission?
Almost more than 1 year now.
So what do you think that they would say as to what the great benefit that you brought to that table?
I think first thing is due to their diversity. I think I'm contributing towards their diversity point of view. That's one thing. Second thing, young people are usually working people. So they know, like, I'm a business owner. I do real estate business in Norwich, plus I have my gas station business in Norwich itself. So I know really what people need. Plus I have more communication. I'm involved more. Whereas some older folks, I don't want to judge anybody, but I have seen less communication with the community itself. But while you're on the run all day, you meet a lot of people, you hear a lot of people talking, and you absorb things that this is what my community really needs. Maybe I don't need we can, instead of putting $1 million in this project, which is a good project, but maybe my community needs that project done first. So I think these kind of things are really important that I have been contributing. If there's any company coming to our city, we know we need them. So how we can ease up their process of getting things done faster so they're on track. Yep. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Other benefits that you all think that young people could bring to the table that maybe we're not thinking about talking about?
Theoretically, probably energy and stamina.
Energy. Okay, we're going to stop using the word old people. Older, okay?
Experienced.
Not even just from not even just a physical, standpoint. I think something about freshness and combining that with wisdom and experience can really rejuvenate. And I think fearlessness always comes with that. And so this sense of let's just do it, let's just try it. Even if someone's like, oh, we've done that before, it's like, no, we can do it this way or that way. And that energy, I think, can revitalize and strengthen a whole board.
Is there a sense?
Especially if the board has done the same project over and over again. I know with the neighborhood revitalization zone, we've done a family day. They've done a family day every year for like 8 years. And they were getting pretty tired of doing that event.
Just stay on. Okay, that's helpful. Anybody else want to add before we keep it? Gary?
I think, too, by having sort of the larger age scope, you have the younger group that challenges the norm, so that if you're, like you said, you're sort of tried and true way of doing things, and you have the younger group that might say, well, have we tried it this way? And even if we have, every time we do it, it will be a little bit different. So let's try it, and let's not be afraid of that challenge. And if it doesn't work out, well, then we can shape it into something new. So I think that's nice to have that balance of the history, but also the new, fresh ideas to sort of merge together.
That's so true. Yeah.
I think that one thing that having younger people in a committee really brings is a level of trust. When you feel disconnected, you don't feel like you can trust the people who are over you, and thus creates a less successful event in general, or less turnout, or wherever the case is. So I think having younger people on board really helps to create a level of trust between both the older community and the younger community, so that we can have a more revitalized staff, so that we can have a more fruitful and empowered environment. I mean, even if you're looking at like the younger ones, like the ones that are in high school, or the ones that are in middle school, or the ones that are in elementary school, a lot of times I remember when I was in elementary school, I love my auntie. She was in college at the time, but I thought that she was old. Like, she's like 20, and I thought that she was old. But she was the one that I looked up to, okay? She was the one that I looked up to, like I would look to her for advice, and I would feel empowered seeing her go through as what I considered, older than me by a lot, but a young adult nonetheless. I looked up to her, 20 years older than me. So with that being said, it's important to have young staff there because the ones who are in middle school, the ones who are in high school, they're looking at the people that are now in college and participating in these events, and thus helps to keep the project, the community, and the dream alive. So I think that, just being able to, keep that trust throughout the community and, help to keep that connection and that healthy flow through their community. That's really why it's important to continue to keep, young people in there and have those fresh ideas. And I think that it also helps to keep them motivated and them going. So that, to me, is, I think, really the bigger thing, because once that disconnect sets in, it's really, really hard to continue that trust between the project and you, to be quite honest.
Good point. It's an interesting way of thinking about it in terms of the connection through family, right? Because sometimes we hear a lot that, well, the younger people don't care enough about the community, right? They're not as emotional attached. They may go get a job someplace else, and so there's not. But I think you've got a great point in terms of those family connections you're seeing in terms of that love for the community and that passion to give back and what's important to them. So 2 more comments, yeah.
Well, sort of everybody's idea kind of relates, I think, but generally speaking, I feel like the sort of map of what a community is has drastically changed since the start of a lot of these boards, and what the community's doing now in the sense of individually and as a community is drastically different than what it did even 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And without having these diversities on the board changing also, you continue to have that disconnect in communication. And honestly, I feel like a lot of the younger people don't even know where to begin gaining leadership. They don't even have that perspective often in their high schools. They focus on their individual lives and maybe the lives of their friends and getting out of their parents' house. Nobody's really thinking about what a nonprofit board is and why it would be useful and
Really
how it
needs a sexy
affects the
name, doesn't it?
community. So there's just a huge disconnect in this communication. By changing those diversities, we can hopefully narrow that down.
There's so just a factoid, right? Some boards have term limits, right, where you can only stay on the board for 2 years, 4 years, 5 years. Many boards have no term limits, right, which means the people who founded that organization are still on the board of that organization. And there's a lot of disagreement about whether or not you should enforce the term limits to make sure people are constantly changing, but potentially losing somebody awesome or potentially getting rid of somebody you want gone, right? So there's last, I know we had somebody in the back. Yep.
I think it's important, pretty much what everybody was saying is that connection that's missing from the younger generation and older generation, but not just that, but diversifying what the boards in general. Because me being only 19 and doing my passion, which is dance, I have an influence outside of a normal life, different people, So it reaches at a different level of different people. So I'm part of the Student Success Leadership Program at the school, and me and my friends, we do this chat room thing, and I decided to use my Facebook for the very first episode, and it just so happened that many dancers that because I'm pretty in my own world, I'm pretty known in dancing. So it so happened that I was that bridge of connection for other people, and we were talking about mental health in that certain episode. So I was the bridge, and I actually have bigger influence, and I don't think people understand, and young people don't actually realize how much influence they actually have at that age, being 18, 19, even 10 sometimes. They actually have bigger influence, especially using social media like him. He's younger, and he understands that in this younger generation that social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, these play big parts now in our world, and that everything is becoming very more tech. And I think making that diversification and just in the board and making that connection is important. So I think it's very important that we get to that you get to, like, just by being, like, if I was part of a board, I get to show people that, like, even just speaking right now, I get to show that, like, somebody that looks like me has a voice,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
And, like, I wouldn't know that unless, like, maybe I wouldn't feel as insecure to say something if maybe, you know, somebody in my family didn't say something, or somebody that didn't look like me, like she said something. So I think making sure that diversity in a board is something I would bring, and anybody could bring.
But it's a different kind of influence, right? So
Yeah.
the influence, and let me tell you, the number one complaint we get from most organizations is that nobody knows about them, right? And I don't know, we can't reach people, nobody knows who we are or what we do, and you're telling me you've got a platform of a Facebook page with 2,000 people on there, they'd kill for 2,000 people to know what they're doing. So you raise a really, really great point. I want to move on to the next topic because it's another, I think, going to raise some more discussion, more about the barriers. So when we talk about barriers, it means, you know, truly, what is it that's stopping young people from getting onto a board or knowing about a board, and really understanding how boards that exist can change their ways in order to adapt so that they can have more engagement from young people. So, Chris, you want to start a little bit about what you think, from your perspective, are some of the barriers that exist about, from the board's perspective, and maybe we'll hear some from them, what those barriers are.
I think there are recruiting challenges that organizations need to overcome, and I parallel it to recruiting in higher education, right? You know, you have schools that want diverse students, and they complain that there are no diverse students that exist. And so, yet we know that that's not the case. And so, as board members, we're quick to say, oh, you know, it's so hard to find young people. Like, God, why don't they want to join our board? And if you're not deliberate in recruiting young people, then you're not going to get young people, right? If you think about, you know, so let's say I wanted to recruit a 15-year-old for my board at higher ed. Well, I don't operate in circles where there are many 15-year-olds, right? So I have to be deliberate where there are 15-year-olds. So I can be in those spaces and talk to them about it and explain about higher ed, right? And so it's the same way for older board members, right? Like, if Wendy wants to recruit a board member, let's say she wants to recruit a 25-year-old. I'm going to guess that she's probably not in a lot of circles where there's 22 or 25-year-olds. So she has to be deliberate to find those spaces where there are 22 to 25-year-olds. And so I think boards, like, make excuses on why there are no young people, but that's because they don't want to put in the work to be deliberate on recruiting the young people. So that's kind of I have some other thoughts, but I'll stop there.
Okay. Kevin, what do you think? I mean, you're elected when you serve in the board. So in terms of even elected official department, what do you think some of the barriers are?
Yeah, speaking from a political aspect of it, to many younger generations around my age and even younger, and even 30s and 40s, politics is very messy, and there's a lot of complicated webs when it comes to politics, and it turns people off very, very quickly. Mostly the fact that they don't understand politics, they don't want to get into the weeds of politics, the detailed workings. When you get into the details, that's when there's many avenues and people get lost, or they feel like they can't be able to do much because we're looking at decades of building block. And of course, people can speak broadly to anything, but when you get into the detailed works, especially in politics, it's a turn-off. But so despite all of that and all the negativity that comes with politics, there's a positive. Is if you give many of the younger generations the ability to have their voices heard and their ideas expanded, and just to make them feel important, you want to give them the reasons why they should be involved in public service. Why should they get involved in politics and shape the community that they're living in instead of standing on the sidelines and either complain when things happen or that affects them and or all of that. You want them to get involved as well. So you want to give them a voice and That's the biggest thing is give them a reason. If you keep shutting them out, they're gonna keep standing on the sideline or just take a seat and not do anything about it. For me, again, I wanted to be a film director for the longest time, but it all changed when I learned about all these public individuals. Again, Susan B. Anthony, Abraham Lincoln, JFK, and so on and so forth, and what they did for their community and for the rest of the world. And I don't let all the negativity of politics or whatnot discourage me. I want to make a change. I want to be one of the leading voices for our youth in our community. And if we could get more involved, the better. So
I'm hearing that kind of the hope of empowerment,
yes.
right, is what that may be a barrier. Is that really what's the, you really have to really, really love it in order to get certainly into politics, right? You really got to love it. But truly that could be more engaging, right? A barrier now is maybe there doesn't seem like there's a lot that you're going to actually affect change, but you really have to be committed. Some of the things that I hear about barriers to a nonprofit board from young people specifically are that it's boring, right? Serving on a nonprofit board just sounds boring, right? That is not fun. It's not fun enough to compete with the extracurricular activities of other young people. Also that it's often said that young people don't have the ability to give or get, right? That they don't have the access to people with money. And I'm here to tell you that most boards today can overlook that because they need the energy test. The other part is really kind of tokenism, right? So people are asked to be on boards, they feel like they're just being asked because they check off a box. And so it kind of immediately comes in with the feeling of, I wasn't here for the right reasons, I'm just here to check off a box for you, and that's a barrier in itself. So can we talk a little bit more about other barriers that you see in the community? I know, Chris, you want to share a few more thoughts on that?
Well, I guess kind of along those lines about like it being boring, if it really just depends on the organization, right? And because there are plenty of good organizations that have young people on their boards because of the mission of the organization. And so I think that organizations need to like self-reflect and ask why they want young people on their board. Because if it's going to be because they want it to inform the mission or the programming, then you genuinely want that feedback. But if it's just for, as you said, to like check a box, then of course the young person's going to be bored because they could see right through that. So I think that organizations need to be truthful within themselves to figure out why they want young people, right? Is it because it's a youth-driven organization that needs that feedback to keep that ground truth there, or is it just because we have a lot of older people and we'd love to make that mean average a little bit lower?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of accessibility and inclusion and making sure, as Chris was saying, that we're being deliberate, but that we're deliberately being inclusive. When you put that mindset on to be inclusive, like even the fact, and I get annoyed, like even the fact that we have to have these kinds of conversations, like it's great that we're doing this, but it should just become the norm, that you're being inclusive, that you want to have young people there, that you want to have age difference, ethnicity, diversity in a variety of different ways. And not just to check the box, because we know that, so I'm 31, I can't speak for the 21-year-old, so we need more young people. So you can't just check a box when you're talking about being diverse. So I just think it always bothers me because it's very unfortunate that we're not doing everything that we can to be more accessible to young people so that they can have an understanding of what being on the board is. Of course it's going to sound boring if no one's actually going out to where the young people are and explaining to them the opportunities that this will open for them, the resources that this will bring to them. We have to go to the people. Even in my job now, we're at Connecticut Office of the Arts, when we're looking at being inclusive, we're looking at workforce retention and leadership and talking to young people through professional development services and realizing that we haven't really been serving all of who we say we serve. And so if we want to serve, all my errands flew off. That happens when I'm passionate. But I'll get it there. But if we want to serve these people, we go out and we find them and we explain to them what the opportunities are. So obviously there will be gaps and lack of understanding if no one is explaining what it means. And you're right, we need a better name.
So where's the disconnect and where's the barrier when you say let's just go find them, right? So we're here in a college, right? I would hope this would be a good, feeding ground in some ways. Where are those other places that we're not connecting with? Because that's a common feedback we get also is that we just don't have the connection with young people. We're not in that world. We don't have a connecting point to do that. And then there's the other piece of, you're going to be asked to go on a board for maybe a 3-year term, right? And what 21-year-old is going to say they're going to know where they're going to be for 3 years and attend 12 meetings a year and serve on a committee, right? So there's some other barriers we can get into a little bit. So did you want to add something about barriers as well? What you think the barriers are?
I think one of the primary barriers is here. Is that disconnect with the young people. Growing up, my father actually worked for the Boy Scouts, and so my knowledge of boards is their board, and I certainly wouldn't want that on their board even today. That's a huge board. Those are important people that have a lot of connections into the community, into businesses, into funding. That with that perspective of what a board is, I wouldn't even consider looking to join a board. So we have to show the young people that there are other options, there are other types of boards, other types of committees that are more accessible to them.
So how can we reach, what would you all advise for a board out there that's looking to engage? Where do you think they should start?
It totally depends on the board. But they should start with looking at who they serve. With the neighborhood committee, we need to look at the young people that live right there in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
I have a question. So, in talks about not wanting to just pursue just to check off a box, but thinking about young people from you all's experiences, even when there is this sense to genuinely want to include young voices, do you find that boards tend to look for those who look really good on paper or are the most qualified and have them as the stand-in? It's like I'm president of student government and I'm a part of this and that. Of course, you're going to ask me if I'm qualified. Is that something that you see?
Absolutely. I think especially for more established boards, they're looking for name recognition, right? And sometimes that has to do with resources, this idea that people can bring resources. But as someone who, as an ED, I want workers, right? I want people who have energy versus someone who people think will bring resources. Because at least in my short experience on boards, the people that we think are going to bring resources just because of their name don't even bring resources. So the people that bring resources are the workers, right, that have community buy-in, and they're able to sell 100 tickets for your event. Right? They don't know high net and high worth people, in Clinton, but they'll sell 100 tickets for your event, right? And so I think that we do get blinded by this idea that we have to have the letterhead with all these people that have connections instead of looking at people who are actually going to work, because a board is a volunteer organization essentially, and but we can get blinded by that.
And it doesn't just happen with young people, right? So older boards, it's the same recycled group of people, right? These people are being recirculated through the area. They've been on 14 different boards. They just go from one board to the next board. We know who they are. They're on all the different letterheads. And we look at them. So it's not just young. We're not just all. We do it at all levels of looking for a certain part. I know you want to say something.
Yeah. One thing I do want to say, because I have my hand up before, is that I just think we start too late. I feel you're starting now. You're starting here at the college. Every single high school has community service requirements almost for kids to graduate. These boards aren't on that group. I used to work for NFA for the Project Outreach. The point was to get kids to go into community community service. They have to do it. That's their job for a whole year. It's a place for kids to be on something for a whole year, or half a year, or even 2 or 3 years. And I know someone else said, well, high schools aren't. It's not true. To get into college, they want to see community service. You know, so to me, what we're doing here today is in the wrong place. No, it's in the right place.
You're okay. You're okay.
But this should be happening at a lunchtime, at a high school, or because it's not just NFA, it's East Line, it's all of the different schools, Plainfield, all the different schools around here have to have community service. So if you're a senior and you have to do community service, even if it's for 20 weeks, that's at least 4 times you go to a board meeting or something. But if they don't know that you're looking, and that's really a big resource. It really is.
And it was kind of along the same lines is like I feel a lot of individuals once they are doing college or they're starting their jobs, if they even hear about the opportunity of being on a board, there's already so much on their plate. They're like, well, how do I add this in now? And you know, I hear you say like you have to commit